Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. And yes, we are heading to the end of another year and indeed another decade. Can you believe that? So as a content creator, I want to gather some thoughts from you all, wherever you're listening in the world, about the best tech successes and of course the tech fails over the last 12 months or indeed 10 years. So please keep your emails coming over to me at techblogwriter@outlook.com. And remember, you can also find me on LinkedIn, Twitter and Instagram just by looking for Neil C. Hughes. And my website is techblogwriter.co.uk, whichever is easiest for you. My door is always open. I must admit, I am intrigued what you're all going to select. But today, I want to talk about a company called Spacemesh, which is an incredibly cool name, isn't it? But they were founded and based in Tel Aviv, and Spacemesh is a new project from an expert team of cryptographers and entrepreneurs. And they're focused on breaking down the barriers to entry and reviving the true decentralized ethos of blockchain technology. And for people outside of this space, yes, it can be incredibly complex, but the plan with this podcast is to remove that intimidating feeling that you may have and get everybody on board and try and talk about it in a language that everyone can understand. So without further ado, let's get the co-founder of Spacemesh onto the podcast to find out more. So a big warm welcome to the podcast. How's life in Tel Aviv today?
Pretty good. Hacking away on blockchains, building Spacemesh. Can't complain.
Excellent. Now, one of the reasons I invited you on the podcast today is you have more than 25 years experience as an entrepreneur and building world-class software apps. And I believe you are also Vice President of Technology at Sony, amongst many other positions. So I've got to dive in there and find out a little bit more about your rich history in the tech industry. So can you tell me a little bit more about your background and essentially what interested you in a career in the world of blockchain?
Sure. So first of all, Neil, thanks for having me. It's appreciated. So about my background, I'm an Israeli-born American entrepreneur and software developer. I have been building companies since around 2000, mostly in Silicon Valley, San Francisco, New York City. I was fortunate to be in Silicon Valley for what's called the user-generated content revolution and have built a successful personal video sharing startup over there. What I'm passionate about and what I believe is that, free and convenient sharing information and media between a group of people is important. That's kind of the thread that kind of unites everything I did. I'm trying to build software that has, positive impact on people as individual, as groups. And before the blockchain, it was mostly about, self-expression and user-generated content and things like that.
And of course, now you're with Spacemesh. And for people just tuning in and hearing about you for the first time, could you give me a bit of an overview on what Spacemesh is, the kind of problems that you're solving, and ultimately, what was the motivation behind establishing this project?
Sure. So around 2015, when I was building mobile apps in New York City, I was starting to get very interested in crypto and in blockchain. So I started to look kind of deeply into the two major projects in this space, which are Bitcoin and Ethereum, and got to a very basic realization that creating a global internet money that's not dependent on a nation state bank or any other entity, and programmable smart contracts, including that, is very important. And that's what I like to do and contribute to, in my career as an individual on this planet. Basically also was pretty disillusioned, but what now some people call, the four horsemen of the apocalypse future, which we're kind of experiencing today. Are you familiar with this term?
Yes, I have. But could you just give it a brief description just for everyone listening?
Well, so basically, what we're seeing that social media and the internet is being basically monopolized by few ultra powerful companies, and obviously we're seeing that social media has a lot of dangers in terms of extreme views and censorship issues and democracy manipulation issues and things like that. And it's pretty clear, and it was clear to me, working on the internet for a long time, that was not the future that we, the people, the software developers that created the internet, intended to be. So to be more specific, I was in New York City. I had a music app startup. I was building apps for the App Store, and I became to realization that working in a closed garden environment and building technology like that, it's not a really level playing field that that small startups have a chance, and it's a big problem. So regarding the motivation to Spacemesh, I'm starting to look into blockchain and cryptocurrency, and I came to a very basic realization that this is what we need in terms of technology, especially permissionless, decentralized cryptocurrency. There's different variants. And as I looked more into this project, I saw that both in terms of the technologies and the community behind this project, which are very important in blockchain, is that we need an alternative. We need something else. There's some inherent problems that this project have. And if we want to build, a permissionless, decentralized, programmable cryptocurrency, we need to work on kind of like, the infrastructure level, what's called in the blockchain industry, the layer one of things, in order to create a cryptocurrency that has these good properties. So I came to this realization, and then I got together with two great Israeli entrepreneurs, Rami Katzenstein and Tomer Efek, and two brilliant researchers, Dr. Tal Moran and Dr. Ido Bentov. And Tal Moran is kind of the godfather of technology called proof of space. He's been researching it for a long time and developing concept algorithms and protocols. And we'll talk more about proof of space, I'm sure. And Ido Bentov is a very prolific and talented cryptocurrency researcher and developer who's kind of an expert on consensus mechanism and Bitcoins and cryptocurrencies. And we kind of got together and created Spacemesh to build, a permissionless, decentralized cryptocurrency based on kind of a different set of security assumptions and different set of algorithms, what's called in the blockchain space protocols, which are quite different than both Bitcoin and Ethereum. At that time, both of these projects, relied on what's called proof of work-based consensus protocol, and also quite different than what we see now, which is several projects that rely on proof of stake-based consensus protocols. So the motivation, to summarize, is to kind of look at all these issues in technology and community and try to come with an alternative solution that has some really nice properties and kind of sidesteps or eliminates a whole set of problems that you have in the other kind of base algorithms behind this cryptocurrency.
And a few moments ago, you did mention that Spacemesh employs the proof of space-time consensus protocol. And that phrase alone is something that would make Keanu Reeves say something like, whoa. So can you explain how that works, and also what the benefits of this proof of work and proof of stake mechanisms can bring to businesses and users?
Sure. So when you look at the cryptocurrency, and especially like a permissionless cryptocurrency, then you need to think about how you achieve consensus on a ledger, right? So you've got the ledger, which is a list of transactions. Let's say for simplicity's sake, it is only like coin transfer transaction between you and me, for example. So how do you reach consensus in a distributed environment, in a permissionless environment that anybody can join the network and participate in it? Because we're talking about, decentralized internet money here. So the idea behind proof of space-time is to replace the core consensus mechanism from proof of work. It's useful. Let's talk about proof of work for a minute. So just like a quick recap. So in proof of work, in order to achieve this consensus, you basically have participant in the system do computational work, employ a CPU or doing some of computation in kind of like a race environment, competing who will actually create the next block. So that's kind of in the core of how, for example, Bitcoin and Ethereum work. So there's kind of a race to create the block, and all the participants participate in this race, and one of them kind of win this lottery and submit a block, and that's considered kind of the canonical next block of transactions in the ledger. So that's kind of how proof of work works. So in Spacemesh, a protocol that's based on proof of space-time, it's quite different. So what we do is something such as this. Instead of having this like constant computational race, we have a protocol that ordinary people, meaning people like you and me, or more specifically, anyone who has a PC with a hard drive and some free storage, can actually commit a part of the storage to the Spacemesh network. And this is kind of how you establish your identity and prove that you spent a resource in order to participate in the consensus protocol. So just to clarify that a bit, instead of like proving by doing computational work that you have this dedicated equipment and fast CPU that constantly trying to solve these mathematical puzzles, you basically do a one-time setup on your computer in which you say, I want to allocate, let's say, 250 gigabytes for my free space to the Spacemesh protocol. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I'm with you so far.
Okay, so you allocate that, you basically commit that, and then you're becoming like an entity which participate in this consensus to build the ledger. And as long as you're running the Spacemesh software on your computer and you keep having the space committed, you are participating in the protocol, you're submitting blocks, you're getting block awards, you contribute to the security of the system by running this protocol. Without doing significant more expenditure of resources, meaning doing expensive computation, spending a lot of CPU cycle, using any dedicated hardware, etc. So it's kind of a unique idea that is a little bit hard to grasp, but this is kind of the basic of it. So, the important things here are basically, first, you're using an existing computer. So this is very important. So you don't have to buy a dedicated hardware just to do mining, which can be expensive, etc. There are hundreds of millions of computers with free space today in the world. So players that are, can actually start and join this network without spending any additional money. And the same kind of commitment of space which you've done can be used for a very long period of time. So once you do this one-time setup, meaning committing 250 gigabytes on your drive, you can use it, and your computer does not use a lot of resources to keep powering this network and keep basically securing it and contributing to decide on the canonical ledger of transactions. So we call it proof of space-time. Also, there's a time element of it. It's fairly technical, but essentially, like, for example, when you get cloud storage from Google or from Amazon or from any other cloud provider today, you don't just pay for the total size of space you want to store your files. You also pay over time, right? So you pay, for example, I want 250 gigabytes for my file and per month, and you're paying as long as you keep using it. So that's why we call it proof of space-time, because the protocol on a technical level basically allows these people to prove that first they allocated that space on their drive, but second that they keep committing it to the Spacemesh network and not using it for anything else on an ongoing basis. So this is kind of like the basic of our version of proof of space protocols. And when you think about it, it's useful, again, to compare it to proof of work kind of currencies like Bitcoin, like Ethereum, like it is today. It's a very different kind of construction, right? So this is kind of the basic of proof of space-time.
So my understanding is then that Spacemesh's mission is actually to create threefold, to create a fair cryptocurrency that will become a global means of payment, but ultimately to ensure the fair distribution of that cryptocurrency and establish a global programmable infrastructure for tokenized apps, communities, and indeed economies. So the big question I've got to ask is, how do you plan to achieve all of that?
Right. So there's a lot of words, right?
Yeah.
So, okay. So there are a few things which I think are very interesting. So we use this technology that I just explained of proof of space-time to basically lower the barrier of entry to the system. So when you're talking about decentralization of cryptocurrency, you're talking about creating a fair internet money, digital money for humanity. You need to lower the barriers of entries to it first, and second, you need to find a good way to distribute the cryptocurrency around the world. And the proof of space-time based protocol basically solve those things. So what I mean by that is that people who actually run the Spacemesh software and committed the space, they participate in the protocol and they get rewards in Spacemesh coin for their contributions. So the Spacemesh coin is distributed between all of these players. It's very different than other systems that have centralized means of distributing the initial coin. So with proof of space, we also solve this big problem of fair distribution and having a low barriers to entry for it. And again, it's very important that, let's say I'm an 18-year-old student in South Korea. How do I participate in this cryptocurrency? How do I use, without spending any money, getting into this game and start getting this coin in a fair way? And the fairness thing needs a bit of clarification. What do we mean by fair? It means that the coin is distributed based on your contribution to the Spacemesh network. And more specifically, if I, for example, commit a terabyte of space on my drive to Spacemesh, I will earn coins like anybody else who's done the same thing, right? So all of these people get what controls the distribution of the coin is math and the protocol itself, and it's basically linear to the amount of storage you commit, which is kind of like the resources you commit to the system. So that's about fairness, and it was clear to us that you have to solve this problem of coin distribution, low barrier to entry, and have very low cost to enter the game in order to create this fair money to the world. So when we're saying fair cryptocurrency, we mean the things I've said, and then it's also important to note that the rules of how the cryptocurrency is governed are all math and protocol driven, right? So fairness, in a way, also means that no entity, no central banks can manipulate this value of the currency, that only the protocol and the people who are contribute to it control how this cryptocurrency is distributed, and it's hard to game it. So this is critical in order to become this global means of payment, because you won't have a global means of payment unless you'll have this good infrastructure to support it, on the technology level. And it's very important that also there will be a wide global distribution of that cryptocurrency, which we solve, as I kind of said before, by having the people who run it on their computers get the vast majority of the cryptocurrency, basically by minting it, by getting rewards for participating in the protocol. So that's kind of like the second point. Another important point is that Spacemesh vision is not just to do a cryptocurrency for payment, which is obviously very important, and we still don't have this today, but also create like a programmable infrastructure that allows you to do more sophisticated things, tokenization of apps, of communities, of economies, and this is key in order to create fairness. And let me explain a little bit about that. So beyond having money, which is fair, you also want to have programmable tokens, for example, that allows any community to kind of formalize the rules which in it wants to operate. I hope it's kind of makes sense. So on top of Spacemesh, we also build programmability features which allow you to do more sophisticated things. But again, what's important, first is to do this infrastructure in a good way, and this will enable all of these things to be built on top of this. And if you look at other projects, for example, today there seems to be kind of like a tendency to move too quickly to build what's so-called in the blockchain industry layer 2 solution of kind of higher level tokenization mechanism and what's now called, distributed finance or DeFi kind of solutions. And our approach is that you have to solve the problems that on the fundamental level, on a lower level, before you can actually do this and add that in order to create fair communities and economies above it.
And another topic that I think we must talk about is mining pools, because there's always been a prolonged issue within the industry and within the current system. So how is Spacemesh solving that problem too?
This is a very interesting question. So we need to understand, to talk about this, we first need to understand how mining pools got created. What's kind of the reason behind mining pools and what they are. So mining pools were kind of added to proof of work based cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum because there were several problems that the core protocol itself couldn't solve. So for example, the frequency of your rewards. So we're saying we want to create a system with low barriers to entries where a student from South Korea with his personal computer can join. We need to actually reward him for his contribution to this protocol and to the system. Now, because what happened with Bitcoin and Ethereum, the only way for you today on those systems as this person with modest means, without a lot of money to buy, to set up their own mining farm with very expensive equipment, is to kind of join a mining pool. So there's an incentive mechanism that if you want to get rewarded frequently and not like, let's say, once every 3 years or once every 30 years, then you basically have to join this pool. So there are different kind of pools, but generally speaking, when you join this pool, you also have an additional tax that you as a miner, as an individual, you need to take part of what was supposed to be your reward and give to the pool for providing you this service. So in the Spacemesh protocol, joining a pool is not something that a rational miner will want to do. It doesn't give you any benefit because we designed this protocol to ensure that you can get rewarded without a pool on a fairly frequent basis. So we make this whole mining pool issue kind of go away. And this is critical because what happened in proof of work based currencies is that we see an industrialization and kind of like a conglomeration of the mining power within few very rich, very well-resourced entities, mostly in China, and that makes the cryptocurrency centralized. And the whole idea here is that we want to create something decentralized, something that not only few large parties control. That's kind of like very important when talking about, a permissionless cryptocurrency, new kind of money for humanity. So by designing the protocol that make these mining pools irrelevant or irrational to join, we can achieve in Spacemesh hopefully much higher degree of decentralization, which is very important. A little bit more technically, how we solve it is that Spacemesh basically has two core innovations. One of them we talked about a little bit is using proof of space-time and storage as a consensus mechanism. And the second one is move from a blockchain kind of data structure to what we call a mesh data structure. And I need to explain that a little bit, but essentially in Spacemesh, instead of having one block in every period of time, let's say 10 minutes or 5 minutes, it depends on the specific of the proof of work based currency. The Spacemesh protocol enables all the honest kind of miners at home using the computer have multiple blocks submitted and added to the ledger at the same time unit. So let's say instead of having one block every 10 minutes or so, we can have 200 or so blocks per this unit of time. And this gives the mesh the property that a lot of more miners can actually get rewarded for participation, and the frequency of the reward can be much better. So that chain to mesh, it gives us a lot of other things, but it's kind of helping with this. So the mesh helps solving the mining problems and makes this whole mining using dedicated hardware kind of unnecessary. And let me emphasize one more point, that by designing the protocol that actually runs on commodity computers and hard drive, you make mining pool, which are basically a collection of specialized hardware that runs in a data center that requires a lot of cooling, and it's very expensive to operate, also unnecessary. Because in Spacemesh, a mining pool will need to run storage the same way you run on your own computer, and it doesn't have any advantage if you run it like in an enterprise cloud environment. It actually has additional costs associated with it, like DevOps and maintenance and dedicated computers you buy just for the sake of the protocol. So this whole construction favors the user at home.
And another hot topic at the moment is around the incredible barriers to adoption, in particular for young people. So what are the required tools that Spacemesh is providing so that the industry can indeed move on to that next phase of adoption and do that much easier?
Right. So I think I touched about it in my previous comments, but essentially what's critical, again, in the terms of who participates in this protocol, who runs this cryptocurrency. We're not even talking about who's using this money, because we want everybody using this money eventually. So you start with making it really easy to install and to use for home miners that kind of don't require, that allows basically non-developers, meaning people that don't know or want to mess with command line kind of software, without any cost, to enter into the game, to start operating the network, and to create this decentralized network. This is key. So first, we're talking about how this barrier to adoption to participate in this network. Then, on a high level, because we offer more scale on the fundamental level, I mentioned the mesh structure, which allows many more transactions in a unit of time compared to like kind of legacy traditional blockchains. this kind of infrastructure performance enables an ecosystem of higher level tools and capabilities to be built on top of that. And that opens the way to mass adoption, because you can really support massive amount of people paying to each other or participating in financial apps, tokenization app, etc. So it's a process where first you need to have like a solid protocol, you need to have more capacity, you need to lower the barrier for adoption for people who run this network, and then basically you enable mass adoption of cryptocurrency for people who have no computers at home, no interest in actually participate in the mining, but want to have this currency which they know is fair and ungameable. So this is kind of like the plan for that.
And can you tell me a little bit more about Spacemesh's view of money as a representation of value? And also, how does Spacemesh's coin fit into this view?
Okay, so the view is that that coin needs to be fair, and I think that the theme that goes through a lot of the things I said today, it needs to have low transaction fees. It needs to be non-gameable. It needs to be all of these properties and be highly distributed in order for the coin to fulfill the goal of becoming representation of value and a global means of payment. So I think you can see we've been very focused on like the protocol and the technology and the proofs behind it as a project in order to enable this property, which will come later on. So we're very focused on kind of, the fundamentals and solving these problems we're talking about to create this coin that everybody basically can use and rely on in the future.
And speaking of that future, when can we expect the Spacemesh testnet to launch? Is there any dates on the horizon that you can share with us today?
Sure. So just before we talk on the Spacemesh, we've been very focused on two things, which the first is like finishing the protocol and the security proofs for the protocol. We fairly believe this is vital. Before you launch cryptocurrency, you need to make sure that your security assumptions and the protocol itself is mathematically proven, been peer-reviewed, been audited, etc. So that's on the protocol level. On the development level, we're close to finishing a testnet, which we plan to launch in a few weeks, an open testnet. And by open testnet, we mean that anybody will be able to join from their computer. So we have an app, we call the Spacemesh app, that anyone, meaning non-developers, you don't have to mess with complicated command line commands and the terminal and so on and so forth. You'll be able to install it, commit space, execute transactions. So this is kind of what we call the open testnet. We've been running closed testnet for a while now with few hundred nodes, and we kind of advancing and hope to get to a few hundreds or few thousands nodes at home on the open testnet. So that's been our main focus, and it's coming soon.
And of course, we've talked about adoption, and something else that can increase adoption is partnerships. So what kind of partnerships are you looking towards?
Well, that's a good question. Again, Spacemesh relies less on partnership because the whole point is that we want to enable everybody to join, not going through specific partners necessarily, meaning you have a commodity hardware, you have like a general operating system with some free space. We want you to be able to join and not go into specific channels. That said, we're looking to partner with wallet providers, crypto wallet providers, to add support to Spacemesh coin. That's important. And to secure user funds and to make the coin more usable when we launch the mainnet. So this is something definitely we're exploring. And in the long term, we're looking into different kind of partnerships. For example, talking with hard drive manufacturers or PC manufacturers about making it more easy for people to get Spacemesh on the systems they sell, but that's more longer term partnerships for us.
And for anyone listening that would like to keep up to speed with your developments throughout 2020 and beyond, can you just remind them of where they can find you online, and also contact your team or join your community if they do have any other questions?
Sure. So first of all, it's very important to note that Spacemesh is a 100% open source project. So everything we do is open source and public, and we're actively looking for contributors and collaborators to come build Spacemesh with us. There are full-time developers and researchers working with Spacemesh, but we definitely want the community to join and build it with us. And our goal that any developers who is interested in contributing to the platform will be able to do so, and will have the necessary information and tools and collaboration from us to do this. And we already have some contributors and collaboration today. So everything is 100% open source and public on GitHub. So if you're a developer and would like to contribute to the project, check out our GitHub repositories for the platform. We have a Gitter channel. Gitter is a platform for developers chat. So join us on the Gitter channel, ask questions, introduce yourself, so we can onboard you and direct you to areas that we need help and contributions on, which are numerous. And if you're not a developer and you have a computer with some free space, you're curious about Spacemesh, you want to join our testnet, then definitely go to our website. It's spacemesh.io, the URL. And on that site, you can learn more about the project and join a mailing list. If you join the mailing list, we will notify you as soon as the open testnet is available, so you can install Spacemesh on your computer and start to understand the platform and help us test it. So the site is mainly the gateway, and everything I mentioned is linked from there. So that's a good starting point to learn more about the project. We also have, blog posts and the protocol definitions for more technical audience who want to understand more about how the consensus protocol works. We have an ePrint that describes the protocol in depth. Yeah, and we definitely want more people who listen to you join in one of those ways.
Fantastic. Well, I loved hearing today how you employing this new mathematically proven consensus protocol that is ultimately replacing proof of work with this proof of space-time concept that you have there. And I think for many people, this is an incredibly exciting space at the moment, but it's also quite intimidating for many. And one of the reasons why I think conversations like the one we've had today is so important to increasing adoption. So a big thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to come on here and have one of those conversations with me. So thanks so much.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Spacemesh is an incredibly exciting project, and I think it's always great to hear how a company's building a new solution and current challenges of securing adoption and overcoming any obstacles in the way. But I also love learning more about today's guest and his invaluable 25 years of experience as an entrepreneur and building world-class software apps. And of course, it would have been criminal of me not to mention his time as Vice President of Technology at Sony, amongst many other positions. And for me, it's that path that led to him becoming interested in a career in the world of blockchain and learning about the motivation behind establishing the project that is just as cool and reveals more about his success today, or indeed the future. So, as regular listeners will know, I am fascinated by the human backstories of guests and how they got to where they are today, because I think we are all guilty of looking at the success of Beyonce, Ed Sheeran or Bill Gates, but it's the early days of their struggle, their challenges, and what shaped them to achieve that success in the future. That's where the real value is. But before I flirt too much into the territory of rambling and preaching, I'm going to check out and leave this podcast party early. So please keep your messages coming in to my email at techblogwriter@outlook.com. My website is techblogwriter.co.uk. But it's time for me to sneak out the back door. But I will return again tomorrow, same time, same place. So a big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.